Yeah, because I have a kind of disclaimer that I want to go over at the beginning
All right.
about that.
Sound check. Sound check. Okay. Okay.
Boo,
We're good to go.
boo, boo, hee hee hoo. We like ready, ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Ready.
Like we're live already?
We're live already. Yeah.
So okay. Good evening and welcome to CanHammer, your stop for warmer 40K from the Great White North. Today's episode is 180.
Yes.
20 to go to 200. What
Yes. We still
what?
haven't. It might take us a while to get to 200, so we don't have to think too far in advance about what we're gonna do. But
Well, like the minimum time is 20 weeks.
yeah.
Maximum is like 90 weeks. I don't know.
Depends how many pandemics hit in the meantime.
Yeah, so show 180 is going to be a much requested show. We're going to go over some tournament etiquette is not really the word that I like to use, but I guess it works. Just things that you should and shouldn't do at a tournament. Good practices. A lot of people, I think, are feeling the claustrophobia of sitting at home in their hobby rooms, and they want to maybe prepare and get ready to start hitting the scene a lot more seriously. I feel that way as well. Had a nice break. And we're also going to cover some of the big ninth edition leaks that happened today.
Yes, sir.
So that's pretty exciting. Pretty pumped.
Yes.
So before we get into the sponsors, how you been? How you been, Darren? What have you been up to?
Oh, same old. Life is the new normal right now. It doesn't look like it's going back to the old normal anytime soon. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm just so used to not leaving that it's just become normal.
yeah, like it really is just normal now. So they just told us that they canceled all the summer camps. So that's another 2 months of kid at home. And
Yeah,
yeah,
he used the singular. Yeah, I don't feel bad for you at all. I have one kid and two adults.
yeah, yeah.
Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. Okay, so why don't you take it away and pay the bills?
All right. Well, shout out to all our watchers and followers and supporters here on Twitch and YouTube and downloaders of the podcast. Thanks to our sponsors. We got Dan at Red Dragon. Saw Dan the other day. Delivered something to my house. He looks like he's doing well. Store's picked up again, and which is great. So it's always good to see that your main man has survived what pretty hard financial times I would expect, but starting to pick up again, which is great. And thank you everybody for supporting Red Dragon over the cool down, the shutdown. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, I just ordered a bunch of stuff, some blue spray for my sisters, and it turns out I had store credit that I was unaware of. So my ninth edition starter set, even though it's not up for pre-order, I have a pre-order in for it. Pre-order the pre-order.
Yes, so I think Dan has started taking pre-orders just based on what previous box sets prices were. Of course, he'll give you back money if it's overpriced or whatever. But so if you do want to get like a pre-order in for the ninth edition starter box, which will be Necrons and Space Marines probably, then maybe even Sisters, who knows? Then get it in with Dan.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Get it done early, and then it maybe makes it more likely that we get copies ordered up there, and they can maybe, because they're a network of several stores, they can probably use that to make sure they get enough for everybody. So
Yeah, some of
that's good.
those recent box sets have been like hot items, like
Yeah, they're good value.
undersupplied. So, yeah.
They're good value. Like the sister one was maybe the one that I thought was maybe mediocre in value. If you took each individual part out of it, and you're like, okay, you got the limited edition book. Okay, that's like $100 normally, but like I would never buy that normally. So I don't really care that it's double the price, right? And the models there weren't that many, but it still worked out as a deal. So,
Yeah. Like so
but
this is
like
good.
some of these other ones are huge.
Like
Like
this is gonna
that.
have like all the new books and stuff in it, right? It's probably gonna have like your 9-inch markers and all those things. It's gonna have like a bunch of like data cards. It's gonna have maybe there's a coupon for the app in it. Who knows? Yeah, it's gonna have a whole bunch of assault intercessors and maybe a unit of those veteran dudes, and then a couple of characters. It's gonna have a bunch of new Necron warriors, and maybe a few of those score peck guys that they just leaked this week. So it's probably gonna have a bunch of stuff in there.
Sick. I'm looking forward to it. Cool. So we ready to move on?
Yeah, let's talk about not so much the Daily Show because it was fairly non-specific. We can talk about Mike Brandt's post on Warhammer Community, which was much more specific than the 40K Daily Show was.
I guess, yeah. So one of the things that I did want to start off with is we talked about last episode. We talked about the command points to army side and how that's being standardized. And they didn't really allude to that. Well, they actually released the chart. So there's 4 types of games that you could play. There's a combat patrol, which is 500 points, 3 command points. Incursion, which is 1,000 points, 6. Strike Force, which is 2,000 points and 12, and Onslaught, which is 3,000 points and 18. So as you can see, they basically scale by 6 command points for every 1,000 points. So I'm sure if you wanted to play 4,000 points, you could probably just play 24 command points. But it's pretty neat. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, well, everybody was, for some reason, 20 had become the number. People were assuming 5 points per increment, not 3. So it's 12 now. And so obviously some people are very happy. So if I just get 12 CP, that's already 30% more CP than I usually have. And some people are very unhappy. So,
it does negatively affect my army.
Yeah. So, but they've already said that we're probably getting CP in the command phase as well. And they have not told us what the command phase yet. Hopefully that's tomorrow. So it probably is going to be more than 12 CP, but then of course now you have to spend CP on stuff too. So
yeah, so you kind of got ahead of yourselves. They also released the turn order, and so the turns are going to be very specific, the same. Movement phase, a shooting phase, assault phase, morale phase, and then they added, as Darren said to the beginning, a command phase. Mm-hmm. Which to me is a very, very good thing, because there was a lot of rules in a lot of the previous editions that were start of turn, like when you begin your turn, when just stuff of that nature. And so now they have a specific phase for that, which would be really sweet, because now you can apply the general. I'm assuming the phase rules is like if it's your turn, your abilities go first and things like that. Also, as an AOS player, having that kind of something similar at the beginning. So you'd be doing all of your abilities and popping off all your abilities right away. Now, it may have a weird effect depending on how they write the abilities. Like if it's, okay, this model is going to activate this command ability, and it's all units within 12 inches get rerolls, let's say. Or 6 inches get rerolls to hit. Well, does it apply if the model moves, or is it all units that are in range of it at the start of the phase? So depending on how they word that, I'm going to be really interested to see the effect on the game of that. Does it mean that you have to plan out your turns better, so that turn 2 you have to be in position to get all your stuff ready to go? That's something that kind of really intrigues me when I see that.
Well, AOS and of course, is like that, right? Like you have to think almost a turn ahead because you have to do all that stuff before you move.
Well, it depends on the abilities, right? Some of them are like this guy, all models within 6 inches of this model as he moves, and some aren't. So it kind of adds some tactical flexibility if they have some really good abilities that they maybe don't want you as mobile with. Yeah, you have to decide. Now, Psychic Phase isn't in the command phase, though, like in AOS.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a weird one, is that you can move and still cast psychic powers from the looks of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, like AOS, there is always that warlord trait of they don't call it warlord traits in AOS, but you know what I mean. So there could be like a warlord trait, like you take this instead of anything else, and you get 1 command point per turn. I don't know. I'm like, I'd be curious if the sisters had something like, when one of your characters die, you get a command point or something like that.
We're probably obviously in the PAs we don't have command phase yet, so we don't have abilities that trigger in a command phase. But you might assume then in the next series of books in 9th edition that there will be command phase stuff.
And maybe they just say things that happen start of turn happen in the command phase. We'll see.
Yeah, they probably.
Or it could be as simple as every model has a command. Every character has like a command ability, and then you pay CP to use it, just like AOS. It could be that easy, and we could be blowing it up for nothing.
Yeah,
but see. I like it. I do like the clarity.
They're still supposed to talk about the command phase in this week of previews, so hopefully they will.
Yep. So I guess we also got a peek on secondary objectives. You want to go through those?
Yeah, so pretty interesting. So basically they kind of previewed the missions. They actually posted a sample mission. So for match play, the missions are called the mission pack, as they call it now. It's called Eternal War, not to be confused with Eternal War in this current edition, Eternal War versus Maelstrom, but just using the generic term that this pack is called Eternal War. Anyway, it's a little bit confusing, but anyway.
It's not confusing at all. It's
and
fun.
there's 18 missions. There's 6 for 2,000 points, and then a number of missions for specific smaller and other game sizes. And apparently the board size also changes for smaller size missions. So that's kind of cool. And then they gave us that table with the number of CP, blah, blah, blah. And what's interesting is, so there's going to be a primary, so, maybe something similar to killing and holding, and then maybe progressive or not progressive. We don't really know the full details yet. And then there's going to be almost like agendas in AOS, and a mix of agendas and Maelstrom cards and ITC secondaries. It's all kind of mashed together. So you pick secondaries that you want to do, and you can pick one from each category, so that's kind of like ITC, and then you try and achieve them, and some of them involve doing these actions where your unit gives up its ability to shoot or fight in order to do this specific action, like destroy a shrine or something like that. So it's kind of like, as they already hinted, a mix combining like elements of ITC, ETC, some book and chapter approved style missions, and making it like trying to take the best of everything.
Yeah, and so the big speculation is they released Mission 3, and when you look at the actual picture of the battlefield, it doesn't look the same as we're used to with a table quarter style deployment, which is basically the 9 inches from the center, and you deploy in each zone. When you look at the new one, it looks more square, less of a rectangle. And if you count the little squares on it, it actually is only apparently 5 feet by 4 feet. And also a lot of the distances are a lot different than maybe we'd be accustomed to. So they have 4 objectives, one in each corner, but they're only 10 inches from the center instead of the normal 12, which is kind of a bit odd. And then the center of the objectives, which are usually in the middle, are only 15 inches from the center of the board, which is why people are speculating that the game board for 2,000 points is what they're speculating for this, is going to be 5 by 4, and that maybe unless you're playing 3,000 points or higher, you don't play on a 6 by 4 anymore. That was hinted at before, that they were shrinking some of the board sizes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's hard to know. I think also people are extrapolating some computer model onto a probably not to scale diagram, and who knows?
Yeah, but isn't that great? Isn't this great to speculate? Doesn't that just feel awesome?
Yeah, I kind of like it, and then I kind of get annoyed by it sometimes. But
I love it.
I've known for a long time. I was told that the game is shrinking, and without too much details, was the board shrinking? Is the number of models shrinking? Well, it seems like maybe both. Definitely, they want number of models to go down. They said so on the stream today. Points are going up. They want to see less models on the board.
We'll get to that. Let's stick to the mission for now. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
So I guess if they do shrink the board for 2,000 point games, it's not necessarily a bad thing. As you alluded, they want to shrink the size of the armies as well. So you don't want to have really small armies with really far distances in between them, right? You want to shrink that kind of corner to corner so that people can kind of engage more. It also removes the kind of null point of my unit is in the back corner and you can't touch it even with your there are things that can touch corner to corner, but they're very rare. So this kind of changes that up, which is neat.
And they did say that the smaller size games are going to be played on smaller size battlefields.
Yeah, which totally works.
Yeah.
And also, if let's say the 2,000 point is the tournament standard and we go to 5x4s, we no longer have nowhere to put our dead models. So that's like a plus right there, right? So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
And if it's on 6x4, it is what it is. You just come to our tournament, so we have extra space.
You have like a foot of mat just as padding.
Well, and then I saw on, I think it was like Twitter, because, everything on Twitter is just sarcastic. Somebody was basically saying like, well, if GW changes the game to be 5x4, all these mat companies and everybody's mats are 6x4, and then they release 5x4 mats, it's like cha-ching, corner of the market type thing, right? So that's like the what's the word, like kind of negative view or
Yeah, I wouldn't change all my 6x4 to 5x4 mats. I would just leave the extra foot.
No, no, no. But that's just somebody being like always looking for kind of the rip off and
Yeah,
everything,
yeah, for sure.
which isn't the case. So I'm pretty excited about it. GW has always kind of until AOS, and I hate to keep comparing AOS to 40K, but I think you have to. Until fairly recent in the general handbook for AOS, GW missions never had that tournament tiebreaker kind of feel to them with lots of different objectives and kind of distinguishing who wins and loses more clearly. It was always like, oh, you got one more point than me, you win, or I win. And it was always like one mission, very simple. And a lot of the tournament formats, as you said, ITC, ETC, they would combine multiple elements of that so that you'd get a very tactical, flexible mission that could kind of reward people that thought about it, put more effort in, and played a bit smarter and kind of designed their army to fit the missions.
Yeah.
And so this definitely shows that in the actual edition, in the rule book, in the start of it, they're working on this. And it shows that it has a lot of potential. And they've been doing that in the General's Handbook. Like, you can run an AOS tournament straight out of the General's Handbook in AOS, and that's awesome. As a TO, it's awesome. It's super easy.
Yeah.
But for 40K, we've never been able to do that. So
I think
now,
it's super cool, and
yeah.
they also said in the future they're gonna releasing feature packs, and they may have different themes to them, and so I think there's just a lot of potential, and yeah, you're right. You know, really engaging the community, the people who've been trying to write better missions, to help them write better missions, and so I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Do you mind if we just take a quick 5 minute, quick 5 minute break? I'm so sorry. I need 5 minutes.
Sure.
Sorry about this, guys. I'm very sorry. Just go grab a beer, guys.
Missions. I'll keep talking about missions. So, the other thing they talked about missions was that there's going to be these actions. So, that I guess they're just calling them actions, but you may be able to take these actions as secondary. So, they gave specific examples. So, it's something for your unit to do when other than shooting, killing, fighting. In fact, often instead of sacrificing the ability to otherwise shoot or fight. And so it's things like raising the banner, or hacking a teleport homer, destroying a shrine, using a psychic action to mind read instead of casting a psychic power. And that in the context of a mission, there may be secondaries for that particular mission to do those things. So, you get a victory point every time your unit, I think that example mission they publish, you're supposed to siphon some power or something, and then it gives you victory points the number of times you've done it. So, and that's an option to take that as a secondary. So I think that's cool. That adds another element and to the mission. And also, people have been complaining that without detachments and stuff, and of course nobody has seen what the detachments are going to be like in Ninth, but anyway, that they won't need troops anymore. What's happening to troops? And we don't need troops for CP, so what's happening to troops? Well, here's a thing that your troop unit could do. Instead of doing nothing, it can go and do an action. So I think that that's pretty cool. And as I said, I think just the best part about it is that they're really engaging the people who are trying to write better missions than they have in the past, and writing better missions. The other thing they mentioned was that they don't like how sometimes you can get in a big lead and then that's it. Game's over. No way you can come back. And so one of the things that they mentioned was that victory points are going to be capped in certain stages. Now, they didn't specify exactly what, but up to this point, this secondary can only score you a max of this many points, and this can only score you this many points. So there's always a chance that you might be able to come back. Now, we'll see how that actually works out in reality, because, things happen. But at least they're thinking about kind of stuff like that. And, people like ETC used to, you can only score a certain number of cards per turn, and, that sort of thing, to try and sort of keep it close. So we'll see if that actually ends up working that way or not. But that's an interesting concept. They're sort of maxing the amount that you can score in stage, as opposed to just maxing the amount you can score for a particular thing.
Well, it makes sense to do that. Like, if you think about it from, you could think about it from the Eldar kind of point of view, or even the Orc one. So like my Orcs, for example, score very heavily early game because they take the board, they throw the boys at you, they control, and I rack up a lot of points, and then you know unless you get like tabled or overran, people destroy boy unit, and then near the end of the game they have to play this like game of huge catch up, and sometimes you've just outscored them early on and they can never win. So yeah, capping it would reward those armies that are maybe some are end of game armies, some are middle game armies, some are beginning of game armies. So it's definitely a good thing, I think.
Yeah, even now, like ITC with the double capping of the ground-based objectives, and so some armies just go all out right at the beginning, double cap everything, get you down like 15-3 by turn 2, and then just try and hold out.
Yeah, get your kill and hold, and maybe get one bonus here or there, deny and win the game. Yeah, I kind of like it. Depending on how it's implemented, it screams to me like this will make Eldar better, because Eldar are always historically an army that can travel great distances and can survive and hide. So if they can just trickle those points throughout the game, so which is cool. I have an Eldar army I could get back out again. Yeah. Okay, so is there anything else you want to say on missions?
No, I think that was it for missions, actions, victory points, mission changes. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to points values. This was really interesting.
This was.
Now, as you said, I think we did a rumored show like 3 or 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and we talked about they wanted to shrink the game, and that's been fairly common. Mindset is that the model count is too high. How do we shrink it? The barrier to entry is too high. The games take too long. The average army in 40K, like an elite army, is still, like if you think about the Grey Knights, which was like the smallest army in the game, was still in the 50 to 60 model range.
Yeah, Custodians
quite easily. Is it the smallest?
Yeah, my army has 15 models.
Oh, but that's your army. Most Custodes players have like 50 or 60 guardsmen, right?
No, not anymore.
No, not anymore. Never mind. I obviously don't care about Custodians. So. No, but you know what I'm saying. So okay, there's those elite armies, but then most like even a guard tank army is going to have 100 and something models, right? My orcs are in the 250, 280 range, depending on how I want to run them. 200 range. That's a lot. Genestealer cults are in the 200. Like a lot of armies are that way, and as somebody who plays both games, AOS and 40K, and I've also done like Adepticon only armies where you're like pumping out 2,000 points for Adepticon and pumping out 2,000 points of 40K. Year after year after year, my AOS army has been significantly smaller. There might be an exception with something like Skaven, which are like 140 guys, or Sisters of Slaughter can get up to the 90 range, but for the most part, they're way smaller and way cheaper to buy. So I definitely like that they want to shrink the game by increasing points costs across the board. And as they say there, it gives them more granularity to kind of change models' power level a lot more, which is true. So if you're running everything at 4 to 15 points for, let's say, an infantry trooper, a 1 point change makes a huge difference. It can make a unit, not as effective or more effective.
Yeah.
Whereas when everything's up in points, a 1 point change is just less of an impact overall.
And they lost that granularity over the last 3 years because everything was just getting cheaper and cheaper every time. It was like cheaper. And then, so actually the point values they published today were almost, I think, actually somebody checked, they were the same point values as when 8th came out. And so it's interesting to see what they're trying to do. And then, of course, there's all Horde armies are all going to be crap. Horde armies are going to be crap. But I just think like some armies just have way too many models, and I don't think they want to see that.
Well, I don't think it'll really change them, because if you have 10 less Space Marines and I have 30 less Orcs, it's like very similar, right? In terms of power, maybe. I don't know. That was maybe a bad example, because 10 Space Marines is right now is 140 points, 150, and Orcs are 250. But you know what I'm getting at, right? So
yeah, and like unless you're gonna start going into fractions of points, which would be stupid.
They won't.
Once you get down to like 3-4 points for a basic chaff guy, it becomes very different to differentiate between the two. And people complain that this is 3 and this is 4. Well, I mean, there's like we're talking like a single point, right?
Yeah, well, if you look at conscripts, right, like they essentially cost the same as a guardsman, because 1 point when you're down in the 4 to 6 point range, which is how they've kind of moved around in, is a significant amount for that unit, right? So the only thing that it caused a lot of maybe speculation or hatred is like an intercessor went up to 20 points and a cultist went up to 6.
Yeah.
So if you really think about that, like the cultist went up percentage wise significantly higher than an intercessor. So, and
Yeah.
like if you think, and I know it's like you can't look at it this way, but if you look at in isolation, 3 cultists cannot beat an intercessor. Period.
Yeah. And like, they said it's within the context of the new game, of which people don't really know much about. So hopefully
Oh, and I
it'll be
understand
okay.
that. I understand that. But,
Yeah.
they've also, cultists in the past were almost unplayable right now, right? And they were 5. So they go up to 6. Maybe they didn't go up a lot, so maybe they are playable again. But
Maybe they get stuff that only troop choices like that can do. Who knows? Like, there's a lot
well,
of
bigger
possibilities.
units, more board control. But
Yeah.
it was an interesting example that they chose, right? Maybe
Well, people were complaining that is this the end of Horde? Because now we got a cultist getting a proportionately larger points increase than an intercessor. We got tanks that apparently can shoot. Hordes can't touch them anymore. We got blast weapons, so everybody kind of doom and gloomy about Hordes. So I guess we'll see. I mean, I don't think anybody can really tell anything right now.
Well, I guess yeah. You could think about it that way. You could also look. There's hordes in AOS as well. What makes a horde army is units that are, I guess, effective and are very low points per model. That might happen still with certain units or certain armies. They're obviously going to adjust the points values in a year, so the hordes may at first really suck, and then they might get a huge points drop, or everything else might get a huge points hike. Like in AOS, there's a lot more points hikes than drops, which kind of makes sense. Like some of those Stormcast armies now are like 30 models, but they can kill everything. So I kind of see the same thing happening here. But
yeah.
okay.
All right. Cool. Well, excited for tomorrow. We'll see what they talk about on the stream.
Yeah, I think they're doing a good job trickling out the updates, and there's a lot of polish to them, and they're coming just enough. They're a little bit more than maybe they were in the past, and I really appreciate that. So
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. All right. Should we move on to our other topic of the night?
To the main topic. Yeah, so this was an interesting one. We were talking kind of before the show. People want us to talk about etiquette, gaming etiquette, not necessarily tournament etiquette, but of course we're going to talk about that as well. But etiquette at the table, how to play, and I think it's kind of interesting that as everybody's in isolation and away from people, the one thing that they really want to know is what can I do to be, I guess, a better player off the table, but at the game store, or off the table. When we say off the table, we mean not playing the game with the toys, but your interactions between you and your opponent above the table, I guess would be a better term.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny that came up. One of the disclaimers here is that I'm going to say is, just because we say it's a good practice to do something, it doesn't mean that we're perfect. I don't know if Darren's ever made a mistake, but of course, never. I've made many mistakes in my past. I've done things that I thought were not very sporting, and I've probably done things that are very sporting. So, you just kind of got to take it for what it is. There's a lot of factors that affect somebody's mood at a given day and a given time, and you don't know what's going on in other people's lives outside of the hobby either, that could be influencing their behavior at the table. I'm not excusing things. I'm just kind of, keep that in mind. And just because we may talk about something, I'm not perfect either, and Darren's clearly not perfect.
Yeah.
So
like I gotta say, so we're gonna split it up into kind of good etiquette or good things to do, and what might be considered bad etiquette. But that's not to say that we do all the good and we never do the bad. It's just these are generally things that most people accept are kind of acceptable ways at which we have to play this game, where two people often who don't know anything about each other have to interact over the course of a couple of hours.
And we brainstormed these things and thought about them, and we're pulling in our experience from the past. One thing you got to keep in mind too, people, is and this is for kind of people that are listening and people that are maybe want to learn from this, and then the people that already know it, is you got to remember that everybody has a different background, a different education level, a different kind of upbringing. And some people are more geared towards being a personal, maybe an arts, I'm going to say the artsy side, and they're more things that like with emotion and communication with people may come a lot easier to them. They're more personable, and it maybe comes natural because of the way that they grew up or the environment they grew up in. Some people have the opposite effect, right? They grew up in a completely different environment than most people would, or some people. So it may take a lot more effort. And, they may never be able to reach the same level as somebody that's super charismatic and super kind of bubbly and kind of there to play. So just kind of remember that everybody's different. They come from different backgrounds and they have different goals in their game. So
yeah, and I think a lot of the things we're going to talk about is not even just general like personal behavior, like don't be a dick, that kind of thing. It's really just about specific game stuff and how people have how people have learned to play the game over time. Not play the game as like roll that dice, but play the game in terms of, acceptable behaviors as it applies to playing the game. So obviously, like, don't be a dick, like all that sort of stuff applies, but everybody's different. But and sometimes you'll meet people you just don't get along with, but you should be able to still follow these kind of things and have an acceptably pleasant game, right? You don't have to love the other person in order to enjoy your game of 40K. So I think we kind of split it into like good and bad, and then I was thinking actually it may be nice to just cover a few of the well-known methods of cheating. Now that is another disclaimer here. Cheating is actually super rare. I know the impression from people who don't play in tournaments or maybe badmouth tournament players is that cheating happens all the time and is rampant all over the place. That's actually completely untrue, but it does happen from time to time. And so it might be nice just to be aware of how, and people have asked us to cover this, how some people may discover or what kind of cheating is out there.
Yeah, and then after that, we'll answer your questions. So please type them in the chat, and we'll hopefully get to them. So we're going to start off with good etiquette, or even prep. Things that you should try to do to better yourself or to be, I don't know, make people like you. I don't know how to word that, but so you take it off, Darren.
So, I mean, basic things like, one of the things that some people see as bad table behavior is if you get too salty about dice. It's easy to get salty about dice. Everybody's had that. But if you get to the point where you're basically, it seems to your opponent that the only reason they're losing is because your dice are bad, then most people generally find that as a turn off in terms of their experience.
So I feel like you went to bad etiquette when I said let's do good etiquette. Bad etiquette,
didn't I? Okay. So
like, I said good etiquette.
Okay,
you're
so
like, yo,
good dice
don't
etiquette.
Be a bitch.
So good. Well, there's always good and bad to each of these things, right?
We can go through them. So like, what are the good etiquettes? Like, what do people expect? Now, there's the stereotypical things that people think about, like gamer BO.
Yeah. I didn't want to
things
straight to the BO.
Well, that was the first point that you put in your checklist. So, okay. So, try your best. I myself am a bit of a larger fellow these days, and it's hard, man, when you're in a gaming store to sweat and stuff. So just do your best to shower and change your clothes and brush your teeth. But really, you have to, you should also do your best to accept people for who they are. Big etiquette thing, which I always try to do, is show up on time or show up early. So this could be broken into several categories. I'm going to kind of elaborate Darren's point because he wrote the show notes. But there's different levels of showing up on time and showing up prepared. You want to be at your table when the round starts, or if you said to your friend, "Hey, let's meet at GW for a game at 6." Maybe you want to be very clear, like, is that dice rolling at 6? Usually tournaments, if the round starts at 2, it's dice rolling at 2. So that means don't plan to be walking in with your army in your bag at 5 after 2, because maybe your opponent went, well, I'll be there at 1:45 to make sure my army's set up. And then they're sitting there watching you kind of prepare yourself to play the game for 20 to 30 minutes. I've also experienced this in like you're at a store and it closes at 9 o'clock. So you're like, okay, we're gonna meet there at 7. Well, if you're not on time and you lose a half hour of that time, it may actually cause it so you don't get to finish your game, or you have to rush your game, which is not as enjoyable of an experience. So just keep that in mind. Be on time. If you have to sign up for an event, we've had this happen. Show up to a tournament 15, 20 minutes early if you can. People drive from different distances. And if there's a snowstorm out and people are late, it's also good etiquette to accept that and be accommodating of that. It's a blizzard. I understand you live 2 hours away and your drive became 3 hours, which meant you left at 5 a.m. and you should have been here earlier than you were, but you weren't. So having good etiquette is also kind of accepting that in certain circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. Dice etiquette.
Yep. This is, we can start with, dice etiquette's an interesting one. There's lots of debates you could have over that. So the first one is, does it matter if your dice are easily legible?
I think it does.
I do as well. So general rule of thumb is make sure your dice are somewhat clear to read.
Don't use those Ideneth Deepkin dice.
Yeah, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is it speeds up your game because you can roll faster. You can grab your dice faster. Your opponent can also see your dice easier, which allows them to kind of have more trust in you because they can see the dice. They understand what you're rolling. It's just a lot better. So that's kind of the step one is try to buy dice like that. The other thing is if you have club dice, all of your logos should be on either the 6 or the 1.
Yeah.
So you should never have like my orange dice have it on the 1, the logo, and my blue dice have it on the 6, and these red ones have it on the 4. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you want to have consistency, and it's more for you for speed of rolling, and also so your opponent can see it clearly.
I also don't like when they have a symbol on both the 6 and the 1.
Unless it's super clear. Like if it's a single skull on the 1 and then it's like your club logo on the 6, that's pretty clear. Yeah. But you're right. It does make it challenging. And those are also, those are more rare than, let's say, and like as a rule of thumb, if you are making custom dice, it is generally accepted that the custom logo goes on the 6.
Yeah. You want to see your logo is usually a good thing.
Yeah. Most people, so there's people out there that'll complain. And like if you played Flames of War, it's like a lot of their dice, the logo's on the 1. But that's kind of the start. When you move into dice, then you move into rolling.
Wait, before you go into rolling, how about crazy novelty dice? Death Guard dice. Obviously not those stupid squig dice because they don't actually roll, they just bounce. But like Death Guard dice, stuff like that.
That goes into legibility. I've always struggled to read them, but I'm used to them now. There's also the thing of like some people roll like the steel metal dice, which is they don't look right when they roll. I think they're balanced fine. I'm not saying that that's bad, but they don't look right. I've seen round dice with like a ball. Those are obviously not okay. Like novelty dice generally are not okay. Weighted dice are generally not okay. Yeah. Try to be like standard. Like people want to, like you don't want to have your opponent be like every time you roll it doesn't look right because your dice are different. You want it to be like easier on your opponent and easier on you.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I have friends who roll steel dice, do just fine with them and blah blah blah, and I'm sure they do look different with them. Roll the same, and some people also roll dice that are too big, and then that's more challenge. Small dice, so I like medium-sized dice, but that's just me.
You're kind of breaking up and those dice are
discouraging.
You're like
anyway, they look terrible.
Breaking up big time.
Oh, because there's. Oh, am I?
Yeah. Hello? You still there? Oh, we may have lost Chris temporarily.
Breaking up now? Am I back now?
Seems like it.
Am I back now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I did actually, I had some internet issues today that were fixed. and then there's some more work to be done. So hopefully, what did you miss from my previous sayings?
You're just ranting about dice. I just your video
So
got all screwed up, but I'll fix it now.
just my video. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, but your
Okay,
sound
so
got
I guess we can go on to rolling.
Yeah, so we can talk about actually rolling dice, which you wouldn't think there's anything. You just roll dice, but there's a few things that you can definitely do to make it more pleasant.
A lot of things, yeah. But we should say, so every table is different. Every opponent is different. So sometimes you cannot follow this. Rule of thumb, roll where your opponent can see or try your best to.
Yeah.
Some tables are ridiculous. You can't do that. Also, your opponent, if it is a ridiculous table and you have to roll to the left, your opponent can also just take a few steps to the left and come see, because it's your turn and you need to roll your dice just as fast, right, and get through it. So that's kind of a two-way street with the seeing of the dice. If you want to sit down in the opposite corner of where I'm rolling and just kind of look up, and then you want to say, I want to see your dice, I'm not going to reach over the table and roll in front of you because I got to get through my turn quickly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to see, then you should roll where you can see, but you should also try and make an effort to see. I mean,
don't roll.
You're on opposite sides of the table. It's not, it's usually low and your back's already hurting. It's not always easy just to, it's kind of a two-way street for sure.
Yeah, and then the other thing is it's generally accepted if you can to re-roll or to remove the misses.
Yeah.
So the preferred way for most people is to leave the hits. When you roll 10 dice, take away the misses. That way the hitting dice, or the ones that are like you're looking for, are on the table for both of you for a bit longer. And you clear away. I also like people that police their dice, maybe move them into a pile of them away so there's not dice all over the board mixing in with where they're rolling. That's about it, really.
Yeah. For sure, it's always better to leave the dice that matter in clear view while you re-roll or gather up all the stuff that doesn't matter. And because in that way, if there's a mistake, it's usually to the opponent's benefit and not the other way around. When you don't want to always seem like you're doing something that's always shortchanging your opponent.
Yep.
Yeah, and then the other part of that is, and this is actually one of my tabletop pet peeves, is when you roll your dice, don't just throw them all over the table. Like, keep it in a relatively decent area. Don't just stand 2 feet away and whip them across the board. If it's one dice and it's a big roll and you want to make it some drama, then okay. But don't whack your dice all over the place, and then you have to you miss some dice. Some goes over a tank, and one knocks over some models and go off the table. Like, keep it in a nice controlled area. It's easier to pick up things when everything is in the same area. Like, don't whack them all over the place. Yeah, that really annoys me.
Yep, for sure. And it's a good habit. And sometimes I can't do this one because I'm just, and it depends who you're playing, but you should say, these are to hit. I need a 3+.
Yeah.
Or hit 3+, rerolling ones. Just say it when you roll.
Yep.
Hit 5+, rerolling ones, additional shots on 5/6s. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try to say it, but of course that's exhausting and you might lose your voice. So
yeah,
just do your best.
And that actually takes us to the next item, which is talking. I think, and I don't mean like, talking about random shit, but just generally telling your opponent what you're doing. I think that's good behavior to get into. It keeps it straight in your mind. You actually tend to forget things less if you're talking through it yourself. You don't have to talk about your strategy, but like you said, like with the dice thing, okay, rolling to hit, 3-ups, reroll ones. Then it's very easy to do. It's just kind of make sure you don't forget things like rerolls. Sometimes you forget things like that, and then it's just generally so your opponent knows what's going on.
Yeah. I also, another, with rolling dice and talking, kind of a segue in, if you have proper squad markings, you can do things like red squad shooting your grots or your blue squad. 3+ to hit, and then that way it's clear like who your target is as well. That's usually a big contention thing with people as they get tired, is they forget to mention which unit's shooting which. Just kind of skips their mind. They may think they said it, but
Yeah, and especially if you guys are playing fast, and so you're taking your models away, and he's moving on to the next unit to shoot. That's fine because you can hear the guy. Okay, next unit is this shooting this, and you're taking your models away, and you kind of know what's still going on. Whereas you don't feel like something's happening without you knowing while you're busy kind of picking which models you want to remove, right?
exactly. It's also on you as the other player to be like, hey, I'm going to shoot this into your grots there, and if there's 2 grot squads, which grot squad, right? Because you didn't specify. So sometimes it's easier to get them to specify before it becomes critical.
Yeah.
But
so this question came up, and this is maybe an entire episode on itself, but intent. So this comes into talking. Generally seen as a good, behavior to tell people what you were intending to do, because then you don't get into disagreements about it later. What do you think about that one? We don't have to dive into intent too much. But.
So intent's an art because there's things like I am intending to do this so that you do that, and then I catch you in this trap. And I'm not saying a gotcha moment. I'm saying like I am purposely doing something so that you do like a mistake or a counteraction to it. So when I see people say I want to talk me through intent, I think it's more like I am going to chart like. For example, in consolidation, you're like, I am going to wrap this model here. I can do it because this guy's moving here, moving there, so that you cannot fall back.
Yeah.
Something like that. Instead of just not saying like nothing, and then the guy goes, oh, I can move out. And you're like, no, I intended to wrap him. You saw me move my thing. Well, if you say it, it makes it more realistic. And then the guy could say, well, before you move that, I don't think you can wrap it. Let's take a look at that. And then when you take a look at things before it becomes a critical moment,
before you move,
there's less of a confrontation. Yeah, and everybody's more accepting. Now, there are certain things like, oh, I'm going to put these orcs in a straight line. My intent is that they're only 1 inch apart so that your bases cannot move in between them. And maybe 1 or 2 of them are a little bit more, but because you're trying to play a game and move it, the opponents, most people are like, oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll do that as well. Yeah. Or somebody that says like, my intent is that all my Tau drones have one model within 6 inches of this guy, and it looks pretty close, but one guy is just out. Well, sometimes for the sake of the game and moving on, he's aware that he could do that. He knew he could do it. He could have done it. It's just it's a little bit of an abstract game.
Yeah. But it can't be like, okay, my intention is these orcs are all 1 inch apart and they're all like 3 inches apart. Like, obviously, you gotta be a little bit.
Yeah, I'm talking like the one guy on the left-hand side. There's one hole that's like 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
Because you're going quickly.
Yep.
And the guy pushes a base through it and does some shenanigans. Yeah, and it's like I could have slowed the game down and I could have measured that, but nobody wants that.
I think a big thing about talking and intent that saves a lot of arguments and time later in that turn usually is pre-measuring. So if you're like, okay, these guys are going to move and advance, and now they're going to be 7-inch charge away from these guys. Do you agree with that? And then it's like, yeah, that looks fine. Then you don't even have to measure it later. And if there's any, say you just didn't push it far enough or got knocked over or whatever, you all know you had agreed that was a 7-inch charge, right? So I think that's a great thing to get into is when you're pre-measuring things. Okay, this guy now will be out of your last cannon range even if he moves. Do you agree with that, right? That's this is how far I need to be away to avoid getting charged or whatever, right? So I think talking with intent, especially when it comes to pre-measuring, is a super good habit to get into.
Yep, and intent is just to make sure that you're doing something legally and you both agree it can be done. So I would hate, sometimes people do things that outplay them, and they do. And it's like, I don't have to announce my full intent for the whole turn, right? Like there's a difference between intent and playing the game.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. And so if you're constantly somebody that's having a contention with, he's not giving me enough intent. It's always gotcha, always gotcha, always gotcha. Because there are those people. Maybe you're expecting people to give you too much. So change your expectations, because there is a big difference. And some people just won't do it, and you just have to accept that. That's also good etiquette. Like some people just won't follow good etiquette, and so you just have to handle that in a way that you choose to. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so question for you, Chris. We'll move on to the next topic. Is this good etiquette or bad etiquette? So somebody's, it's first turn and you're about to lay into somebody with shooting, and they use prepared positions for, cover, but your whole army ignores cover. Is it good etiquette to tell them that actually that's a waste of 2 CP, or is it bad etiquette? Or is it bad etiquette to not tell them that?
So that kind of is a nice segue into my last point on good etiquette, and that's releasing your army's information. I would say if somebody does not know that your whole army ignores cover and they do prepared positions, I would say if you're worried about being better etiquette and a better, I would say you would remind the guy, I'm sorry, that rule actually doesn't do anything in this game because of my army abilities. If you're not worried at all about etiquette, you wouldn't say that. And that's because, quite frankly, you wouldn't want to listen to the show even, because you don't care about that. So I think it depends how you want to be perceived. Some people, if you play me, I probably won't give a shit. I'll do prepared positions, go, I fucked up. And then I'll move on. And maybe at the end, I'll be like, I can't believe I did that. But some people will get very, very mad at you. So you're going to have to take that chance and just kind of figure it out. But I would say for the most part, that's bad etiquette.
Yeah.
Now, it's different if only 3 units in your army ignore cover and the rest doesn't. That's different. Now, it's being above, I'd say it's being better than normal if you say, hey, look, these 3 units ignore that. Do you still want to do that?
Yeah.
That's generally great. But if your whole army does it, then that is a bit disingenuous.
So that's a great segue onto a very common question. How much are you expected to tell people about what your army can do? Are you expected to tell people at all? I mean, obviously, if somebody asks you a pointed question, what does that do? Then you generally can't just say, oh, I don't know. But like, how much of this kind of, especially when you come up to somebody that never played your army before, that happened a lot with Custodes. Like, what is the etiquette around, as you say, exposing, your army?
So I think theoretically, so there's 3 or 4 ways to look at that. I'm going to get into, I wrote down at least 2 things, and maybe we'll see. So the first one is you're generally supposed to go through what's in your army and generally what it does, or at least ask, hey man, are you familiar with Custodes? I have Custodes. Now, I put a lot of the onus on the other person. So, hey, do you have any strats that intercept deep strikers? So if you ask that question, the guy would have to tell you. So I kind of prefer people ask for stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I don't think you should have to, the guy places his unit there. Hey man, you placed, he just places his unit there. You just use the strat on him. I don't think you have to say like, hey man, before you place your unit, I have a strat that lets me intercept you. I don't think you have to do that. But if somebody asks even something very general, like, is there any way you can shoot me when I come in from reserves? And there are some stratagems that are really like wonky worded. And I think you should just tell the person about that. Yes. But you have to, like, if you're an Eldar player, yes, as long as my Farseer can see you, a unit within, like, can shoot you. Yeah. Like, I think you should when asked, but I don't think you need to give that forward. Things like units profiles, units special rules, like, hey, my captain, everybody within 6 inches rerolls 1s. Hey, this is my big mech. He has the super shock attack gun. That gun does 2d6 strength and 2d6 hits, and if I get an 11 to 12, it does mortal wounds. I think that stuff you should have to give it, or at least ask your opponent, hey, do you want me to go through this? There are people like Jason, what he likes to do is say, hey, can I have your army book? You just deploy your army, and I will read it while you deploy. and he'll go through the stratagems while you play. Some people think that that's bad etiquette because he's like reading the book while playing and not engaging with you. And some people don't mind that. So you have to kind of really know where you are and how it's looking. But I would say try to give people as much information as possible and try to be somewhat reasonable with stuff like that.
So I'd say the commonest things I do. So I will always ask, because I play custodians, but also just in general, here's my list. Do you have any questions about what these guys do? Have you played before? Do you have any questions? And if they say no, then that's fine. I mean, it's fine. I'm not going to belabor the point. And then on my side, I always like to know, do you have like what can deep strike, what can't deep strike, infiltrate, whatever. Do you have anything that's going to stop me deep striking? Do you have intercept? Like these kind of things that really, as you play your game, you're going to encounter are always good things to ask beforehand. And then if you forget,
that would almost be a different issue. Like I think we're getting into, there should be another show on these are the 10 things you ask your opponent every game.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? Because like just to stop this shit from happening to you. But
yeah.
One thing too, like, so for example, there's the green tide strat, which allows you to bring a unit of boys back. I always tell people, hey, I can bring a unit of boys back from the dead on any board edge. I don't get into the nuance of it, like, oh, you have to kill you have to kill 15 boys, and then like, but I just say like, I can bring a unit of boys back anywhere I want on a board edge. So just to give them that info, so then people go, oh shit, and they'll like screen a little bit better, or they'll do something. Or I'll even say like, I have the psychic power to jump, which allows me to teleport turn 1, so you do need to screen. But you'll have to assess that for yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
So go on to bad etiquette.
Yeah, I guess they're all good and bad. So takebacks.
Yeah, I guess there is no good and bad. We're just kind of talking about things that you should maybe prepare for.
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad sides to all of these things.
Takebacks is a tough one. It's a tough one. I wish they didn't exist, to be honest.
Is it bad etiquette to ask for a takeback?
To ask for one?
Yeah, oh, dude,
no.
I screwed that up. Like,
not at all.
You let me take
that
back.
To ask for one? No, not at all.
No?
Nope. No, if you go, hey, man, it depends. If I forgot to move my one character and I casted one psychic power that had nothing to do with that character at all, hey man, can I just go and move him forward? That's, to me, good etiquette to let the guy do it and good etiquette to ask. I don't think it's bad at all. And I think that's the way that the game is intended to play. And I think that makes for a more enjoyable experience. And I think it also allows the game to move a bit quicker. Because the second that you're scared to make a minute, like tiny mistake, it just bogs the game down. And in most gaming senses, unless we're playing in our basement for 5-6 hours, you don't have the time for perfection. You just don't.
I think the issues with takebacks and whether allowed or not allowed or whatever, I think the issue is not whether that it's allowed or not allowed. I think it's the issue is that there's a mismatch between what one person expects is allowed and what the other person expects is allowed.
Oh, of course. Of course.
And then there ends up being a communication issue, and then it all breaks down from there.
Well, and it's also this, so like you and I could be having a really fun game, and it's like, okay, whatever, and then, or I'm winning. So it also depends on the some people, when they're winning, give lots of takebacks. When they're losing, they give none. Mm-hmm. So there's that element of it too, like where you are in the game. And there's always the first person to say no more takebacks. And that person, I think, takes a lot of the brunt of the anger in these issues, is the first one that says, okay, it's like turn 4, we're done. I'm not giving you that takeback. That matters too much, or that's too far. Last turn, it was turn 3, and we were only 1 phase away from the movement. I let you do it. Now we're 2 phases away. That's too far. So everybody has their own kind of standard of where they line up on that, and it never mixes between the two people. Like ideally, there would be no takebacks, no one would ask, no one would give them, and then there'd be none of these issues. But I also think that removes a lot of the enjoyment of the game if you have to be precise. And it's not chess, right? And actually, I was watching one of the final games of the Chess World Cup from last year, and one of the guys actually tried to, he like placed the piece and it was like half on a square, half on another, but it could have only went on the one square, and the guy was trying to get him disqualified, and the judge was like, come on, man. Like, you know where it was supposed to be. And they moved on. And this is like a paid professional game.
Of
They
chess.
kind of allowed that of chess. So where it is discreet and clear. So if they're willing to do that, I think we're willing to give a little bit of leeway.
See, the other thing that, and I think it was Weber that brought this up, is when it comes to movement as well. I mean, if you move something and you kind of let it go, and then you want to kind of go back, it becomes difficult, right? Because you don't know really where those models were before, right? Unless you marked it somehow or something. So, it really depends on the situation and how tight the game is, I guess, and how people are feeling. But yeah.
So I guess that's bad. So it is bad etiquette to move a model more than once. Period. So is it? It's different if the model never moved at all. You miss the phase, you want to move it. But if you're saying, okay, I moved this character up 6. Oh, now I want to move him left 6. So I got to put him back 6 and up 6. That's bad etiquette. Now, should you let your opponent do it? Because that's good etiquette, yes. Should you be reasonable about it? And as long as the guy's reasonable, yes. But it is bad etiquette to move something more than once. 100%. Unless he's marked it. If a guy marks it, moves it, and then moves it back, totally fine. Because that's like, we can pre-measure. We just want to speed the game up.
Mm-hmm. So we got a question on the chat. Have you ever had anybody just come right up at the beginning of the game and say, no take back this game?
Oh, yeah. Many times. Many times. Usually, they don't do that. Usually, the guys that think that way. So, when I play Jason at home,
it's always sparkles.
We have games where we go no takebacks, play hard. And we also have games where we go, when somebody makes a mistake, we talk about why they made that mistake in the moment so they learn. So we kind of set that expectation at the beginning of the game. Now, I think that's great. If somebody comes up and says, I want no takebacks, and he needs to give you more of a guideline. I would say, like, no takebacks if you move beyond a phase. Doesn't mean if you declare, oh, I'm moving into my psychic phase, oh, wait, I'm going to move this guy, I didn't roll anything. That's a different thing as well. But I would say that's pretty clear. I think the way that people really kind of abuse that is there's a lot of people that'll take takebacks like crazy and then won't give any. And that's when a lot of the anger online starts, is like, the guy will be like, oh, can I take this back? Can I take this back? And you'll be like, yeah, man. And then in your turn or like a turn later, you make a mistake and they're like, no.
Yeah.
You didn't have
Again,
to give
it's the mismatch
and there are
of
people
expectations.
there are people that are unapologetic about it too. And they're like, wow, you shouldn't have given it to me. That's like, that guy doesn't care about etiquette.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Okay. This is a question, and we can just quickly tackle it, is does the issue of WYSIWYG come into etiquette, or is it just a supply demand or laziness? Or
WYSIWYG is like a huge problem in this game, in that people want cool models, but sometimes cool models give you a disadvantage or an advantage. And this is like the hardest thing for me. And this is one in the previous show I said, like, if they fix the terrain rules, that would be ideal, because not everybody builds their units just like on the box art.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, if a guy states his intent and WYSIWYG gets in the way of him, something that he should be able to do, then, like, this is a weird one. So I stopped gluing banners on my Marines years ago because they look stupid. And most people don't glue banners on Marines, and I think a lot of the new Marines don't even come with them. But if you have older Marines with banners on them, you've now given up. Like, your guys can't hide as easily. So I would say, yeah. So, like, if the guy says it, hey, man, I don't want to count my banners, and he doesn't count it for the whole game, sure. If he says, okay, hey, I've hid my banner behind the wall and you can see like a sliver of it, and he could reasonably turn it or move it to hide it, or a sword or a bolter, and he declared it and said his intention, for the sake of the speed of the game, I'd say, yeah, like, it's obviously good etiquette to help him, but yeah, I would say that's bad etiquette to say, no, I could see that sliver.
All right.
Even though you declared it, even though you could have moved it.
So
do you agree with that, or no?
Yeah, and I think I was thinking more in terms of, like, I'm coming to the tournament, all my Stalker bolt rifles are assault bolt rifles or whatever. I mean, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like that kind of WYSIWYG, whether that's etiquette or, because some people point out that sometimes it's really hard to get, 4 rock saws. You have to buy like 50 boxes to get it, and So
And then there's counts as, that's a different debate than etiquette. That has nothing to do with etiquette. That's like army.
yeah, I think that's just that you just tell the TO that that's happening, and most of the time it's fine. And as a TO, I don't think I've ever had to deal with a WYSIWYG issue actually.
I've seen it plenty times.
Yeah.
Like many, many times. Abuse of WYSIWYG. And I was thinking more from an etiquette point of view would be like just stating intentions and helping your opponent to not screw himself over.
Yeah.
And also, if somebody has like really old models that are slightly smaller than the real ones, it's proper etiquette for them to let you shoot them if they couldn't reasonably hide the proper model.
Yeah. So demon princes, and a lot of people do big conversions on their demon princes and stuff like that, and yeah.
That wasn't an issue because of the character rule, but it does come up, yeah.
Okay, the next issue is talking it out.
Oh, so this is a question, right?
Like, what do you think about people who either insist or it's getting close to the end, they could play another turn, but they just will talk out the last 2 turns, 3 turns, 4 turns? Like, is this an etiquette issue, talking it out?
No, this is a TO issue. So the end of game, and maybe we're not clear on this on our packs, but the end of game, what happens at the end should be covered in the player's pack. So if at quarter after, it's don't start another turn, and then at half past, it's dice down. Well, then at quarter after, don't start another turn, and at half past, it's dice down. There is no talking it out. It doesn't matter. If the pack says you can talk it out, then you can. But ultimately, it's a TO issue. That's a pack issue. Mm-hmm. If it says when you end, you end. Because that talking it out is really a bad thing in ITC, because ITC was designed that if you play slower, you score less points even though you win. Right? Like when they originally designed ITC, the way that they did it was you could win, only get to turn 2, but you both get really few points. Mm-hmm. And so that's supposed to hamper it. But if you talk it out, it gets rid of that slow play element. Mm-hmm. Now, you can also fix that by putting chess clocks in, and then everybody needs to be finished, and then you won't have that issue. But I would say, like, yeah, that needs to be sorted now. Because talking it out, it's usually done because one guy knows he's won and he wants more points. But if he wanted more points, maybe he should have played faster. And then maybe he wouldn't have won.
Bad etiquette to talk it out like that.
Well, it depends if it's allowed or not, right? And it depends if you allow it. That's something that if one opponent says, no, we're not talking it out, I say you go in the favor of the person that says no.
But even if it is in the pack, there will still be plenty of people talking it out.
Well, and then it's up to the ref to enforce it.
Yeah, or people to raise the issue.
That is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make it illegal to steal, but if somebody steals, you have to enforce it, right?
How about stringing games out to get more points?
That's definitely, I've done that. It's bad etiquette. It feels bad too. It just feels terrible. Adepticon 2 years ago had the missions were like that, where when you table the opponent, you got like a 5-point bonus and it ended. So if you really had a really good game, you could like not get a maximum win. So what you would do is you would like trickle your opponent out, leave like 3 units on the board. People do that in ITC still too, like because you need kill and kill more. If you're really curb stomping a guy and you know you've won, some people, depending on like if it's a really big tournament, they need the points, they'll string you along. It's more of a mission design issue, because how could you blame the guy for doing something that is in the best interest of him to win? But it's also like it feels bad to do. It feels terrible. And it feels terrible to receive it, right? So that's a tough one. That's more down to the TO and mission design.
Yeah.
But I'd say if it's a friendly game, don't do it. If it's a tournament, you kind of have to.
Yeah, it is more mission design. It forces
that's
people
part of the etiquette too,
into
right?
these situations. Yeah.
When you sign up to go to a tournament, you're signing up to go to a competitive event, unless it's a narrative tournament. So it's good etiquette to go there and accept that people are going there to win. Right.
Yeah, and I guess that's actually why people asked for this episode. Okay, those are all the etiquettes I had before we go on to cheating. Did you have any others, Chris?
No, not really. It's
I
just
covered a lot of them.
we covered most things, and just it's very like know where you're. Be aware of your environment. Be aware of this is a casual game, and if you're really worried about etiquette, and if it's a tournament, it's a tournament. You're playing to win. But if Darren's coming over to my house, just like it's a good practice to be like, hey man, are we playing a real game? Or are we playing a fake game? Because there was a battle report that we did, and people gave some really hurtful comments towards me in it. It was me versus Ryan Pippy. And before the game, I don't know if you remember it. It was he was training for CanHammer team. Do you remember that one?
But no, okay. But
It
anyway,
was like the
yes.
Space Marines. It was in your basement. Anyway, so I showed up, and he told me bring your CanHammer team list and play it real and hard.
Oh, I remember
And
this.
I
Yes.
fucking stomped him.
Yeah, I remember this.
But that's what he asked for. He wanted to stress test his list, and he wanted to think about it, and he used that game to change the way that he played, I'm assuming. And yeah, people are like, oh, that's not. But and we even said that at the beginning of the bat rap at the beginning.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this is the point, right? So just be aware of that. Like, if somebody's coming over to your house and like, oh, I don't want to play. Like, if I'm like, I'm going over to Darren's house, I don't want to play Custodes. Well, too fucking bad. You're going to a Custody guy's house, right? Like, bring something that can deal with it. But you could ask him, hey man, do you mind taking a little softer list? I'll take a little softer list, and then do it.
Yeah, I always ask people when they're coming over for a stream, like, what do you want? And so I just give them what they want. So,
Yeah, because when people come over to my house, I'm very clear. And this might make me a dick. I don't really care. If you're coming over to my house to play a game, bring your hardest tournament army, and then we'll play. And those are the only games that I play.
Yeah.
I don't play narrative games. We've talked about that. I don't want to do it. I'd rather just not play than like if I'm gonna take the time, maybe get a babysitter for the kid. I want to play a really hard game that stimulates me.
Yep, that's fine. It's your house.
Yeah, well, it's not even my house like that. If we're meeting at the store, I want to say the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's how I set it up. So
Okay. So we don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole with cheating, but I thought we might just identify common ways that people cheat and how you might identify. And then really at the end of the day, how you deal with it is a whole topic in itself. But just so people are aware that sometimes you see these things. It's not common. Chris has probably seen a lot more of it than I have.
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how little cheating I've actually proven.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. But yeah. So can cheating be done by accident? And yes, obviously, you can cheat by accident.
No, you can't. I disagree wholeheartedly with that statement.
No, you think that's just the definition of cheating? It has to be intent?
I believe that. So Will Paul says the same thing,
Cheating
and he says it
versus
more of a
mistake.
joke. I think I think intent matters. I truly believe intent matters, and I think that if you played something wrong or if you made a mistake, and it may have impacted the game, but it was a problem. Like, it's not cheating.
Yeah,
that's what I believe. So I hate it when somebody sees a mistake and they go like, oh, he's cheating. No, he made a mistake. Now, if he does it over and over and over again, that could be cheating.
Yeah. Okay, so I got some examples here I thought of, and you might have more, Chris. So obviously, I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but people purposefully making bad lists or whatever, actually, it's pretty uncommon. There's lots of examples of people who, by mistake or program mistake or whatever, have an illegal list, and there's lots of that in history. But people purposely making bad lists, I think, is pretty uncommon.
Oh, it's very uncommon. Like there's the big famous Adepticon scandal. I won't say his name. He was like 1 point over because he didn't put a bull pistol on because Battle Scribe, you had to add it manually or something like that, even though the guy came with it. That's not cheating. That's a mistake. Now, how the tournament deals with that is how it deals with that. Yeah. That's not cheating. It's a mistake. The other mistake also goes is you paid for 9 tactical Marines and you put 10 on the table because they're in your case and you made that. That's a mistake unless you did it on purpose. But good luck proving that.
Yeah. misplaying a rule or a stratagem or whatever on
On
purpose.
purpose? Oh, that's cheating. Yeah, that's cheating totally.
Yeah. Again, hard to prove because you're like, I
It's
think it's
actually
actually
not
like,
though.
I think it's like, it's actually that.
That's
And
actually
then,
the easiest one to prove, in my opinion, because as I saw this at an event that I was refereeing. I won't say which one, but I don't referee a lot of events. So, and yeah, if somebody does it, the ref corrects them,
and then they do it
and then the
again.
next event, the next game, they do it again,
Yeah.
or the game store tournament the week after, they do it again. That's cheating,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And
For sure.
that's it's easy to prove, but it's like there's very few repercussions in our hobby. So,
Okay, here's a big one. Slow play.
well, since chess clocks came out, it's your fault if you didn't bring a chess clock. So, it does happen. People do it on purpose. People think it's funny. It's terrible. It's cheating. But you can mitigate that by learning how to play on a chess clock and always bring in a chess clock.
All right.
Now, if it's in your basement and the guys haven't had 6, 7 beers and he's starting to slow down, that's not cheating. That's just alcoholism.
Okay. How about loose measuring, extra movements, nudging, stuff like that? Movement shenanigans.
So those are very different things. So nudging is totally cheating. Totally.
Yep.
Loose measuring. So measuring is a lot of perspective, and some people just don't know that the tape measure, the closer to the table the tape measure is, the more accurate your move is. And the higher up it is, the less accurate your move is. But it's also a lot of work, and sometimes it's very hard to get your tape measure right down on the table and measure it. So I would say, like, most people, vast majority of people that have loose movement, it's more of a speed thing. It's more of a kind of, they don't really think that way, because some people are more precise, as we said earlier, and some people are more loose with things, just the way their personalities are. So unless you're doing it on purpose, it's not cheating, but you will see that a lot. So I don't really know what else to say, but yeah, that's definitely cheating if you're doing it on purpose. If you're nudging, if you're putting a water bottle down to push a model forward, yeah.
All right, and this may be another one that you just have to prove by seeing it done multiple times by the same person, but dice rolling cheats.
So this is the easiest, and this is probably the most common.
Yeah.
There's fast rolling people that. So in every game of 40K, I guarantee you there's somebody that rolled too many or too little dice on a roll here and there.
Yeah.
There are people that do it way too consistently. They're always rolling too many hits. They're always rolling too many wounds. This is probably if you want to cheat at 40K, this is the easiest way to do it. Just always pick up a couple extra dice for your hits and always pick up a couple dice for your wounds. You average that out over 100 games and you're going to win a lot more games. Now, how do you do that? Well, remove your misses. Like, if you want to avoid that, ask the guy, can you remove your misses so I can count them? Count your opponent's dice. Look at them as they go. Like, Jason counts all of his opponent's dice. It's like crazy how he does it. He's literally watching the guy. Oh, you picked up one too many dice. Count your hand. And the guy counts his hand and he has one too many dice. So, but that's very common. Oh yeah. I think if you want to cheat, that's the way to do it.
Yep. A dice here and there.
That's what I think, because, I don't count people's dice though, so I don't actually know. I just know through other people that it happens. I've never really I couldn't be bothered to count your dice. I have too much going on in my life that I don't want to do that. I just don't care that much.
All right. Okay. Well, that was the end of my list. Do you have any other cheats that I didn't mention?
Just don't do it. It's stupid. Watch for it. And I think if you do a lot of the other things that we suggested, chess clocks, ask them very politely, can you roll the dice this way, please? Or I'm going to come over there and I'm going to watch your dice. It minimizes all of that stuff. Also, most tournaments release the lists in advance, or at least they check the list. So that's a good start. If you're on lunch break and you're playing somebody, throw their list in Battlescribe and double check it. But due diligence goes a long way in this hobby.
Yep. Okay, so we have answered all the Discord questions. So I'm just going to go to the Facebook post, which was mostly just Hui being obviously pretty bored at home with his new kid, just spam posting everything. But let's see if we got some actual questions here.
Or comments. We can take comments.
Yeah. Okay. Should you disqualify people who use models but don't have books for, or just pulling up Battlescribe, like they don't have the source material for? I guess it also depends on whether like an issue comes up, but.
So I think that comes down to the tournament. You got to be careful with rules like that, because what if you forget? Like somebody's going to forget their codex book on their counter, or somebody's going to forget it in their hotel room. Should they be penalized for that? I don't know. I don't think so. But for the most part, Battlescribe is pretty good, but nothing beats having a real codex book available. Yeah. And a lot of tournaments say that you need a real codex book. So that's on the tournament, man. You just got to follow what the tournament says. And if there's an argument, I think Battlescribe doesn't solve an argument. Only the book solves the argument, or discussion, I guess you could say. Because same thing with like if somebody has a reference sheet with reference rules that they typed out themselves, that's great if it until you have an argument, and then they have to show you the source material or borrow it from somebody next door or get the TO to bring it over or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this was asked. What's the best way to handle it if you think somebody's cheating? Everybody's different, but I think
it's a tough one.
You should definitely stand up for yourself. Don't just take it.
He said you think somebody...
It depends how important it is to you, I guess.
I would say bring
really
it
tough.
Ask the person to stop, or say, hey, man, give them the... You could word it in a way that gives them the benefit of the doubt the first couple times. Mm-hmm. Hey, man, I noticed you moved a little bit far there. It's okay. Next time, please measure it a little bit more precisely, or ask me. I don't mind putting my hand down at the 6-inch line so that you have a mark to move to, and it'll make it easier on you. Yeah. If you think somebody's moving too far, nudging, you could always say that. Hey, man, I couldn't see half your dice rolling. Do you mind just rolling just a little bit over here? I'll come to your side of the table and watch you roll dice, or you could move it here, please. I like to look at dice when I roll it. It makes me feel more engaged in the game. You could do something like you start off always putting it kind of on you. Hey, I like to do this, or can we please do that? And then if it gets worse and worse and worse, like they keep rolling too many dice or they keep doing something, then what you got to do is call a ref over and ask the ref to watch the game. If there is no ref and you're having a fun game, just don't play that person ever again.
Yeah.
And you could even just pack up your stuff and leave and say, I just don't want to play you anymore.
Yeah.
Like there's no sense. And I'm giving advice that I can't really do myself. I'm being aware of this. It's not healthy to get angry. It's not healthy to yell. It's not healthy to get into an argument. You're supposed to be doing this for fun. So if somebody's doing something you don't like, don't play them or call a ref over. That's it. Yeah. Then you take the stress off of you.
That is what the ref is there for. So question, this maybe not really like sort of like stringing your opponent along to get the most points, but how about people who actively not scoring points so they can avoid matchups like in a tournament? Is that etiquette? Is that tournament strategy?
It's a personal choice to win the event, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because there's two theories on that, right? There's the I get one less point than most, but then if other people do that, you're matched in the hard bracket, or you get maximum points, then you get matched in the hard bracket. That's a tough... As long as what you're doing is legal... If you move a unit, so as long as you do it legally, so I'm going to not score an objective this turn. I'm going to move nothing says you have to move your unit on the objective. You can just move them off. I would say it's probably a better practice to not announce that you're doing that and to just do it. I didn't score that. But that's a little bit disingenuous. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as it's legal. As long as you're not doing anything illegal.
Yeah.
Like you're rolling all your attacks, or if you're in combat, you have to roll your attacks and stuff like that. But yeah, like who am I to say that you have to leave that unit on that objective in your zone?
Yep.
you're allowed to move them off. There's nothing wrong with that. You're making a tactical decision to move you further along.
All right. Well, I think that was a pretty thorough run through of what I feel like is some pretty common sense kind of stuff. But sometimes it's not
it
that
can
common.
be. Yeah, but you're saying that as common sense as somebody who runs tournaments, refs tournaments, has been to a few big ones, has played on teams, hangs out with people that play in lots of tournaments. So, it's a different perspective, right, that we have.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's things that we missed, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe at your club, there's only one other 40K player and you have to learn to get along with them. So my answer of walk away from the table just doesn't work, right? I have to accept that there's extenuating circumstances. But as I get older, the one thing that I realize is that you have to have fun first, and you can choose for yourself how you enjoy it. Like you can choose to be angry, you can choose to be upset, or you can choose to just be like, I don't care, or I'm gonna just play better and talk this out. Like you can choose for yourself. So don't put it on you, right?
Yep. Okay. That's it then.
Cool. So with that, have a good